Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Step into the Pivot. And our guest today is Jay Washington. Jay, so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. This couldn't be better timing. This week has been the start of a new chapter, and I cannot think of two people to have my first conversation with about it than you two.
Awesome. We had the pleasure of meeting at a conference we were all at last year, and it was such a fun. And I've connected several times since then. You spent your whole career in financial services. I mean, you just speak my language, so we are super excited.
Yes, we love, to talk about authenticity. We both really spend a lot of time understanding it, unpacking it, and living it. And we both think that it's not just a conversation to be had cognitively, but to really like find examples of it and, look for the embodiment of it. And thank you also for authentically being game to essentially play with us here a little bit, because as we were getting on and getting ready to start recording, you started sharing about what's going on for you today. Literally right now, you're in the middle of a new pivot, and we stopped you and we said, let's hit the record and tell us together with our audience, hey, what's going on for you right now? Tell us about the new chapter.
Excited to share. And what I want to say is it is so easy to jump right into it when you're with people who you know you can be yourself with. I think sometimes, like, wow, it took me 47 years to learn that. And, Sway was a big part of that where we met. And I went through several different phases after I start realizing that. Anger that I put myself in, I allowed myself to be put in a box, resentment, sadness, acceptance. And now where I am is at a place of joy because I realized going through all of that has allowed me to get to where I am and appreciate it so much more and to be a source for those who I see going through that same thing to let them know you don't have to do that. Here's my story. Here's how you can overcome it. So I'm going to take, I always say, let your adversity be your university and then go forth and teach afterwards.
Oh, I love that. One of the first conversations we had here in this, setting on the podcast was about how also all the different emotions you highlighted, that also is not a linear journey. Oftentimes, it's like this is super cool. We come together and then we try to sort of organize it and make sense of it. But it doesn't really go like that, right? In terms of like, oh, now I'm in anger, now I'm in frustration, oh, now I'm in acceptance, now I'm in joy. Oftentimes there's going to be some sliding back and forth as you keep, pivoting and transitioning and transforming. Is that true for you too?
Absolutely. Monday was the start of my new job, and I woke up early and I was overjoyed. And then I went to the gym, and on my way back, I hit a moment where I started thinking about my niece and nephew. And sometimes when I talk about them, I choke up. My mom was telling me my nephew's baseball season is starting soon. And oftentimes when I'm not there, she's his only cheerleader. And it made me realize sometimes that I fight anger at the situation they've been put in by being 12 and 16 and having lost both parents. And on a day when I should have just been filled with overjoy because I got this new job that I'm really excited about, like I had to fight back tears. And I realized, I said, it's okay. Emotion, like you said, it's not a linear journey. And it also made me remember something that's been really been getting me through every challenge is that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. I had my moment. I remembered the abundance in my life and I moved on. And I'm grateful for that because so many men are not taught how to process the various emotions. And when it gets hard, we struggle. And so I pat myself on the back because that was something that I was very much subjected to in years past, God, in months past. That temporary sadness would have ruled my entire day. But I've learned to change that.
We have those moments in time, and we have to give ourselves the capability to think about them, to work through them a little bit so that we can move forward, right? It's all those kind of things, and it's part of being who we are. It's part of, when you started talking, what I was thinking of is, your authentic self. But think about how long it probably took you to get there, right? And acceptance and things like that. So talk a little about, how you were feeling that you were living as someone other than your true self, other than your authentic self.
I did such a good job at it. I didn't even realize that I was living that way anymore. And I remember I was part of a men's group. It was June of 2023. We were having a weekend retreat, and the leader, who I am very close to, said, Jay, he said, you do the most amazing job of making people feel that they know you and you haven't let anybody in. And that's when I realized that what I've been living as my authentic truth, in fact, was not. And I started working through that. And I realized that working through it didn't mean I had solved it. And the last year, I would say 2024 started to really take a dark turn probably around May. And I didn't know why, but it just did. And I was really struggling to the point where a friend of mine who has known me since I was 17 said, I was here when you lost your father. I was here when you lost your grandfather and your grandmother, three of the most important people in your life. I feel you're in a worse place now than when that happened. And she was right. I shared at Sway that at one point, as I was driving home, I said to myself, if I slam this car into a wall, the noise stops. I'm insured. I've got savings. My niece and nephew are taken care of. Everything, a pretty little bow is put on everything. And then I said, or you can get some help. And I ended up working with a coach who helped me to realize that I have lived from a place of not feeling worthy of being myself for so long that I actually sent a version of me to step in place to be what I felt everyone needed to be. And what I was going through, he said, the real you is finally strong enough to step out, but the old you is fighting to hold on. So you're actually involved in a fight, internal fight with yourself. The real you is winning, and a lot of the sadness is mourning the person you were who took such good care of you for the past 4 decades. And he was absolutely right. And he said, the beauty of this is when you come out on the other side, and you will appreciate what he did and you will never look back. And this last year will be as if it almost never happened because you will now know the purpose of old you and the purpose of new you. And that's where we are. And it brought me back to my faith. And on a daily basis, I thank God that I went through that because I would still be living inauthentically if I hadn't. And I do know it's not going to be linear, and there will be moments when I slide back. I may slide back. I will never go back.
Well, I'm going to say before Evie says what she wants to say is what I love that your friend recognized that in you. I think that is so important, and I think sometimes we don't do that enough with our friends or those kind of things because we're afraid that we're overstepping or whatever. But I love that. You that's a lot to be thankful for to have a friend like that.
Absolutely.
And you talk in sound bites. So, meaning so good, right? So inspirational. And that's really, I mean, I started taking notes, then I stopped because I was like, I can't keep up, I can't keep up because these are such good, moments of wisdom. And I feel like that's really the muscle we want to be exercising, practicing this ability to tune into a larger knowing, a bigger perspective, and then start to let that come through on a regular basis. And, that is probably the best way, the best remedy for both the hurting one who is, invested in old ways of operating and is not really letting go easily, remedy for the one who wants to, come through and really express who he really is. And at the end of the day, I think that's probably when you let that guidance come through, best role modeling for your niece and nephew and everybody else around you who knows you, because you're living by example. It sounds like you've done a lot for these kids in every way. Is that true? It sounds like you all as a family have been on a pretty big pivot
Yes.
journey.
I think about my mother, who I can't imagine, burying a child that she tried a very long time to have. There was almost 9 years between me and my sister, and she really didn't even get the opportunity to grieve because there were two children at the time, 7 and 11, who needed a mother figure, and she stepped right in. And I just remember thinking, my God, I'm gonna have to be their father figure because unfortunately their father battled his own demons. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I'm the fun uncle. I don't know how to do this. And I look back now and, you know, a friend of mine, several actually, my closest friend said, we never doubted you. You're the only person close to you who doubted your ability to do what you did. And I realized, people always tell me they're so fortunate to have you. I'm fortunate to have them because they gave me a North Star. They gave me a reason to be better. And I believe that most men who really struggle in life, it's because they don't have a true North Star. They may have one that's been prescribed for them by society, but until your North Star comes from within you, you can never truly be your greatest self. And I'm thankful for that pivot. It healed a lot of wounds in me that I didn't even realize were wounds. And, it's been about 5 years now. And I smile on a daily basis because I realized that I made a choice to love those children. And it brings me so much joy because to make the choice to love a child that you didn't biologically create is a special gift. It really and truly is.
Yes, I'm a member of a blended family, so we've explored that terrain a lot. And my best friend in Croatia is also in that context. So it just comes up a lot in my life, and really, like, it really touches my heart when you say this. And I just want to slow down the conversation and feel it. And from there, comment on. I think that's a lot of what you're talking about and teaching with your example that, growing in our capacity to feel all the feelings, that it's safe to feel. When you're choosing to, you know, think about things differently or fully engage with that, idea that, wait, I was so excited beginning of the day, but now I'm feeling something about my niece and nephew. What is that? That the growth in your capacity to be with it all. That for me is really, really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you were going to go back to your younger self, what would you say to him?
That I'm enough. I would hug him and I would tell him you are enough. And it would be just that simple. I look back now and there's not much about my life I would change, but that would be the one thing that I would. And I would tell him he was enough. And knowing that, my younger self would have set boundaries. That's when you'll find you ever want to stress test friendships, start setting boundaries. And the people who are truly in your corner will applaud you. And I'm realizing the value of the friends who see you for who you can be. They're going to be the ones who support you when you don't support yourself. And so I wish I could have gone back and been that friend to myself who saw the better version of me and let him know he's coming and you are enough. Trust
Yeah.
the process. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I mean, my coach was a godsend because he helped me to realize I would talk about saying yes and not setting boundaries and doing things for people. And he said, do you hear the disdain in your voice right now? I said, yeah. And he goes, my sense is that you love doing for others, but that you are doing so much right now that you're draining your own cup. And he goes, Mr. World Traveler, he goes, you really do have to put your oxygen mask on before you can help anyone else. And I never realized that. And now I realize that my boundaries, and he did warn me. He said, when you start, He's like, it's going to be like a pendulum. You'll go from no boundaries to boundaries, 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 and then you'll swing to a healthy balance. And I have found that the people I truly love, like one of my guy friends, he said something to me as a joke, and I said, "Nope." And he goes, "It's about time you started standing up for yourself when someone tries to minimize who you are." And he goes, "I've never been happier to hear I'm not accepting that from you."
Oh, that is so amazing. I'd love to have a whole, hour worth of conversation about this. I work on this a lot in the center, especially behind the proverbial closed doors. This is what people come in for individual sessions. I mean, so much work around this topic because I think we go about teaching it to each other the wrong way when people are little, when we're first born. We demo all kinds of examples of things that look like boundaries that are not really boundaries. Then we cross each other's boundaries while exhibiting boundaries, and it's all like it's just all super dysfunctional. And you're here, the whole conversation you've had with us is really speaking into this. Who am I? Do I show up authentically? Do I know how to advocate for myself? Because then that's really loving to everybody else. I think even with the mask, the oxygen mask story, we don't finish the sentence. Like, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help others. Because
Right.
if you don't, you're gonna pass out right there in that aisle, and then the other, you're gonna be in the in the way and not helpful to anybody. And you mentioned faith, and for me, one of the things that's been really helpful with boundaries, and I see you both demoing that so beautifully. And when we forget, we remind each other, help each other out. That really, having lugged a lot of boundary issues for a very long time, that really the only shield I need is made of love. And sometimes it will look like a absolutely not. I'm not doing that. No way. A short, but it can still be infused with love and infused with, a bigger sense of, understanding.
Mhm.
So tell us in conclusion, all of this, we ask a question of all of our guests, pivots. And if you think about, let's say, if you focalize and you think about one major pivot, perhaps the one where you're asked to be, in a role that you didn't think you were going to have, moving from a fun uncle. Did you call yourself Funkle, I think, when we met
Uncle,
you?
yes.
Funkle from Funkle to, okay, father figure, really. While you're still learning how to parent yourself, how is that pivot a step forward for you?
Um, I call it from funkle to dunkle. You can break generational curses simply by looking back and saying, what didn't I have that I wanted? And you give that to that child. Kids now have access to more information and things than we did when I was growing up. So they get to be able to develop and be who they are. And I love nurturing that. And the greatest job that I'm ever going to have in my life is helping to develop two kids into wonderful human beings. And if you can't pivot to that, then you really need to look within and ask, what are you missing? Because it's something so beautiful that you just should not be able to deny yourself the ability to do that if you have the opportunity. Thank you both for bringing these topics to people and to giving a voice, especially to men. We need so much help because we've been taught for so long, be a man, keep it in. And I tell people, the more emotionally in touch you can be as a man, like it takes security in yourself to go against what society has prescribed for you. And I think more men are finally seeing that. Telling boys they can't cry is why we have, as like especially young black men, why we have so many of them in prison because they're not allowed to express emotions, so they bottle them up. And then when they become adults and there are consequences, they don't know how to deal with emotions such as anger, and then it comes out in all the wrong ways. Sometimes just by verbalizing things you've been holding in, you'd be amazed how much better you feel and how everything around you just becomes more enjoyable.
Thank you for this. This is incredibly important as a mom of a young man. This resonates with me completely. We've also had some other guests on this show who spoke into this issue so bravely, and it really is beautiful to see men starting to advocate for, health and wellness of one's, soul and emotions, and of course, mental health. This is the conversation about it too, from this, place of both vulnerability and strength. So really, really thank you for being here with us courageously and raising these important topics with so much, we use the word sternness, but it's like, poise and strength and softness. Soft heart, goes a long way.
Thank you again to Jay Washington. Even and I'll be back next week or in 2 weeks with another great guest. Thank you all for joining us today on Step Into the Pivot. And remember, if you have a pivot, step into it.